when I implemented and consolidated everything to one specific vendor, within the first year, our auto liability exposure went down 40%, and then our frequency went down like almost 70% in a year on the auto side, which is huge, especially when you're talking about having $5.4 million in claims exposure. What we ended up finding out is we only had about 400,000 that was not preventable.
Hey everyone, welcome to Beyond the Build, the podcast where innovation meets collaboration in the world of construction. We bring together thought leaders and industry experts to explore the cutting-edge ideas transforming construction equipment, supply chains, building materials, and workforce productivity.
This podcast is proudly brought to you by Faro, the revolutionary last-mile logistics platform, redefining how high-value, time-sensitive construction deliveries get done. Need it fast? Need it right? Faro.
Welcome all. Today we are joined by Rob Carpenter, a true powerhouse in transportation compliance, risk management, and fleet safety. With a career that spans truck driving, executive consulting, DOT compliance, and tech integration, Rob brings a rare blend of frontline experience and strategic insight. He's advised countless companies from startups to national fleets on everything from driver safety to FMCA audits to telematics systems and theft prevention. Rob's journey cuts across nearly every mode of transportation, including hazmat, heavy haul, agriculture, reefer, and construction, and now through roles at Trucksafe, Gallagher Bassett, Epic Insurance, and Motive. He's helping businesses across the U.S. adopt smarter, safer, and more efficient logistics practices. He's also a prolific writer and educator, making complex compliance topics understandable for everyone, from drivers to executives. Today, we're tapping into Rob's experience to explore a side of construction logistics most people don't talk about, the technology behind theft prevention, maintenance optimization, and real-time equipment tracking. Welcome, Rob, to Beyond the Build.
Thanks.
One of the things I wanted to jump right into out of the gate, because it is a realm that I know very little about, is telematics in general. If you could humor me and probably some folks listening, whether they want to admit it or not, what the heck are telematics and why are they important?
I think sometimes it's different for different people. But for me, when I'm thinking telematics, we're thinking about multiple systems on your vehicle or on your assets or on your equipment that basically are going to tell you different things about your vehicle. So with let's just say telematics from a diagnostics perspective, anytime these systems are plugged into your vehicle, it's telling you in real time, like, hey, you've got a fault code for XYZ. Or if you get into the video side of things, it may be telling you, hey, your driver behavior is X, Y, and Z. So really it's all about communicating from what's happening with your vehicle and your driver or your asset in real time so that you have that actionable information. You can act on it and do something about it. So essentially that's what it boils down to on the dummy version of it. So
yeah, it's a game changer too. So I spent 2 decades in the rental business. So we didn't have telematics, right? It was kind of like you put a piece of equipment out on rent, you have a start date, and then you're managing the PM currency based on dates. You have no idea, like, how many hours are on it, right? You don't know whether or not they're servicing at proper oil levels, power generation. Is it running high, low? There's so many things. I mean, and even with the emission standards coming in with the regens, now all of a sudden you got a truck that's going into limp mode. You don't know why. And you're sending a service tech out for, 2 hours to do something that like we could have prevented through telematics. And
yeah. And one of the roles that I had is I managed fleets for Carter Machinery, which is a cat dealer here in the Mid-Atlantic. And I mean, we'd send things out all the time, whether it was a D9 or whatever it was somebody had rented. And I mean, you're constantly sending service techs out to these things, but it's easier to send them out when you got your PM, like you said, but knowing and having actionable information, like right now, what is this machine doing? And even better than that, like, where is my machine at? Who has it? It is all good stuff. So it was critical to us. And one of the things I griped with them on is they have a specific vendor they like to use that integrates with their system. Like, can we just switch this vendor? And they're like, absolutely not, because it's integrated with our stuff and that's what we want. So sometimes Sometimes it's just about partnerships and the data that you can get from it, not necessarily who you'd prefer.
When did telematics really come into kind of the common marketplace, if you will? Like how long has it been around, and when was it really when did it gain momentum in adoption?
I would say, Scott may correct me on this, I would say like 15 years, maybe, because you think back, I try to compare it to the first time I ever drove an automatic Class 8 truck. And it was 2005. It was a Volvo. These were automatics were unheard of at that point, really. So anytime you got into a truck and you had some kind of an IntelliShift or something, it was like, is this trash? And then I would say by 2010, you really started to see more automatics, more telematics, more data-driven things. And I think from there, it kind of snowballed, and it happened pretty quick. So now it's almost, everything is almost at your fingertips 100% of the time, no matter what.
It's I would say about 15 years ago. And then what we've seen is just the elevation of telematics, right? Before it was just like, like you said, a few things that you could see on a vehicle. Now you can do geofencing. Now you can look at oil levels. I mean, the telematics, like you said, started, and then all of a sudden it started saying, well, wow, how much more data can we get? And then also you had the implementation side where telematics was there, but how many adopters were actually saying, yeah, I want to invest in this? Because Rob, you probably see today, how many companies are still out there that don't use telematics, right? Their fleets aren't big enough. They don't see the value. They're like, why do I invest in this product? They're still kind of doing things the old way when their competitors are running circles around them.
Yeah. And I think sometimes we look at it, like you said, they don't see the value in it. And a lot of times I'll have small carriers ask me, well, do I need 10th Street, or do I need Motive, or do I need Fleetio, or whatever, Trimble? And the question is maybe you don't necessarily need it, but maybe you don't actually see the value in it yet. But I guarantee you, if you actually put it into place, you'd love it. It's just trying to get them, maybe it's an educational perspective more than anything. Well, I think once they experience it and they have the perspective, it's like, I don't understand how I lived without this before. Whether I have 10 trucks or 20 pieces of equipment or 2 pieces of equipment or whatever, just having that information is huge.
Yeah. What would you say the adoption rate was initially when telematics kind of first came out? Was it slow to be adopted, or did it kind of catch fire and grow quickly, or did it have a kind of a critical mass point where it took a while to get to, but then rocketed off in terms of adoption?
To me, initially, it was slow. Like for me, when I owned a fleet up until 2015, I didn't touch it. I just didn't touch it. If I had, I say that, but there were some aspects I did touch. But once people like me started to adopt it and get out of the old ways, then it was like everything I touch now is, I ask, is it automated? What data is it providing me? What visibility do I get? And I think it streamlined everything so much for me, even coming from a manual guy perspective, that now I don't want anything if it doesn't have it. So I think once people started putting their hands on it and wrapping their mind around it, it just exploded. And I think that's why we've seen the growth that we've seen in it in the past 15 years.
Yeah, there's so much to that as well, too, because telematics is one thing, and then implementing into, let's say, your operating system. Because you can give me a whole bunch of data, but if my ERP or whatever data, house I'm using it doesn't speak to each other, it doesn't talk. It's like, wow, now what do I do with this data? How do I put it into the fleet? Do we have a system or how we track this? And then the other big point too, and I want to kind of pivot, is it's the safety component of as well. Now you're doing RFQs and RFPs, and it's a requirement. You start dealing with oil and gas and places where they're like, no, we need to make sure that these machines have these type of fail safes, that you can see this data. So if it's running hot, if it's running, too long, those are things that are now like part of the RFQ. If you come in and you're like, well, I don't really have any of this stuff, it puts you at a disadvantage. So it's marrying like the telematics to give the information, to be proactive. And then at the same time too, you layer in the safety component in there, it's pretty much game over.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, even if you look at the fleet side, I mean, we've got pipeline service contractors that love it. And they've got so much equipment with so many different transient people that might come in and work for them. They want to know where their equipment is, what it's doing, how it's performing. But some of it's financial perspective as well. It's like, how efficient is this equipment functioning now? How can we save money using this data that we're getting? So it's broad depending on, use case. But
to that point, what do you feel are the most valuable data points or metrics that, really impact decision-making when it comes to, whether it's fleet managers, contractors, safety managers, et cetera? What tends to be like the things that people pay attention to the most or has the most impact?
I think it's going to depend on the fleet. But if we're let's just talk techs, mechanics. One of the best things about this is you can correlate and correlate time to projects, and you can actually put a dollar amount to a top-end rebuild with Scott, who spent 15 hours on this job, versus like just throwing a number at a dartboard and saying, hey, I think it cost us X. Well, no, you don't think. This is exactly what it costs. This is what's time Scott spent. It's a huge piece. And then you even look at that from other aspects and talk about wasted labor. It's like, well, Scott did a top-end rebuild in 15 hours. Why did it take him 33 hours, right? What is he doing that Scott's not doing? A lot of times I'll look at wasted labor aspects just from financials to say, hey, what is this really costing? How efficient are we operating? But then you can kind of compare that to other things like idle time, vehicle downtime, usage, fuel efficiency. There's all kinds of things that you can add into that, and just anything that it touches, it gives you the ability to see in real time and actually make changes to make you more efficient, scalable, automated, etc. So it's pretty much a game changer.
Yep. And we used to use them on our fleet vehicles too. Like when I was with the rental companies, I mean, we had tons of trucks, but then we also had our delivery trucks. And some were to say that like the company I worked for, if you looked at just the fleet of trucks they had on the road, they were like the third largest trucking company in the nation, right? And so when you started looking at things like hard brakes, stop idle time, right? All of those correlate to expense. Safety component, going back to that as well. So those telematics are huge. It just shows organizations and the people that work within the organizations, like, how do we improve? How do we give a better experience to our customers? I mean, it's just elevator die sometimes, right? Like,
I think if you look at it from an insurance safety aspect, there's a lot of insurance companies now that are requiring telematics and dash cams in the vehicles because they want to be able to see the sexy metrics of, hey, this guy's on the phone all the time, or things like that. Whereas like you're talking about with close following and hard braking and speeding, all these things correlate to this guy's wearing out our equipment because he doesn't know how to drive. So there's all different ways that you can look at this data to correlate to efficiency and how you can make your company more efficient, because these, whatever the case is, might not be as efficient as it should be.
Scott or Rob, this is a question for you guys, since you both have a lot of experience in this world, but is there any standout occurrence or, event in the past where it's like, wow, having this tech really saved us a bundle, or really, prevented a potential emergency from happening, where it's like, if we didn't have this, kind of like think of it as like almost like a testimonial for telematics. But is there any standout example of a time where they just changed the game for a specific situation?
On the PE side, I was running 20 different DOT numbers at one time. So every time we would acquire a company, we'd get some kind of new telematics system that we'd never heard of, some obscure thing, especially in like pipeline service contractors. They find some of the most obscure technology people I've ever seen. And you go out there and visit with like Berry Brothers, and it's like, hey, what do you got? And I got Bob's Telematics, whatever. And it's like, where did you find this? But anyway, we would acquire all these things. And then one of the things that I found is I could look at the functionality and the data that was coming from the functionality of these systems and say, this is not it. We need to change. So when I implemented and consolidated everything to one specific vendor, within the first year, our auto liability exposure went down 40%, and then our frequency went down like almost 70% in a year on the auto side, which is huge, especially when you're talking about having like $5.4 million in claims exposure. What we ended up finding out is we only had about $400,000 that was not preventable. It was just the tree fell or whatever. But that's a huge amount of money that you're spending every year. And to be able to make that 40 and 70% change in a year's time, I mean, that's when the financial people start to love you. And I mean, once you get to that point, it's like, you've kind of created job security for yourself.
Yeah, and I look at it from like two different aspects. One, you have the cost control, right? Where loss prevention was huge. To be able to actually go and find your equipment, see when it's moving, get it outside of a geofence, catch it before it takes off and you have to go find it somewhere, right? That was one. But also the telematics, just for like, how do you increase your revenue, right? When we used to go talk to customers, I was a differentiator for me to be able to tell the customer, yes, we can do geofencing. Yes, we can monitor the PM currency. Yes, we can do even fuel levels on generators on when they're getting low. That's a game changer to basically increasing your revenue as an organization. So those are the two instances that come to me, in not one specific instance, but like when I started using telematics, it was like, wow, I can basically help reduce my cost, and I can also acquire more revenue, generate income. That's where I think the rubber meets the road there. And one things I wanted to ask you, Rob, was for everybody listening out there that doesn't have telematics or is just kind of limping into it, what do you think that right fleet size is between, okay, I think we need to invest in some telematics, or yeah, we're still a little bit small, I don't think we're quite there yet? Like, what do you think that threshold is from like, an OEC or original equipment cost or a piece count?
I used to say like 10. Like once you get to 10 assets, you need to do something. That used to be my metric. But now, we had a case down in Georgia, Atlanta, believe it or not. Landscaper buys $1 million piece of equipment. The guy's only got maybe 5 pieces of equipment. He finally saves up all this money, gets a loan, buys a brand new $1 million piece of equipment. It gets stolen like a week later. Brand new piece of equipment. And fortunately, this piece of equipment had a tracking unit on it, but the thief, they cut it off. But he had the secondary one that came with his dash cam telematics that was in another place. And this is how they found it. So now I've kind of started looking at the cargo theft element and the asset theft element of this thing. And it's like, can you really function without it? Like geofencing your lots and your job sites. We've got a multi-billion-dollar contractor that's a client in Tennessee, Brentwood, Tennessee, probably the only multi-billion-dollar construction company there. But their biggest claim is theft, construction equipment and asset theft, whether it's welders or generators or earth-moving equipment. And if they didn't have telematics systems that was actually geofencing each one of these bridge construction sites or whatever the case might be, I can't tell you how many claims we would probably still have open that didn't get closed. So I used to say 10, but now I think it depends on what you're doing. Like pipeline service contractors, construction companies where you've got constant jobs changing, geofencing jobs, asset protection, cargo thefts become huge. So now it's almost like if you have one piece of equipment that you want to keep, you probably should have something.
It reminds me of, unless you're in Southwest Texas, right? Have any of you guys seen Landman yet?
I haven't seen it yet, but my uncle, he's vice president of construction for Summit. He used to be with Enbridge and Spectra, and he's been doing oil for like 50 years. And his son's a rodeo guy. So I hit him up. I was like, have you seen this land? Is it worth watching? He was like, yeah. It's kind of like when you see what you do on TV, it's like, that's not really what happens. We wouldn't have done it that way. So, of course, I hit Alton up. I was like, hey, what do you think? Is it real? How real is it from the guy in 50 years? He's like, it's pretty accurate, but there's some things that are out.
Yeah, you get out in the oil fields and start going to West Texas, you're like, it's not identical, but yeah, I can see the tendencies. And, movies, they embellish things, but one of the parts, and I won't ruin it for everybody, it's kind of like down there in the West Texas, Southwest Texas, it's kind of like, yeah, equipment just disappears, but usually about 3 weeks comes back. Like we don't file claims. It's just we let people use it and then figure out. So it's one of those things. Do I want telematics to actually know when people are stealing from me, or do I just want to know that it's going to come back? But different environment, right?
One of the funny things I remember you mentioning, Rob, when we kind of chatted briefly on the phone was your Facebook Marketplace story. That was that the same guy in Atlanta, Georgia, with that $1 million piece of equipment?
Yeah, so they actually found this piece of equipment. It was sold on Facebook Marketplace for $200,000. So they went to where it was. They found it. The guy claims he bought it from Facebook Marketplace. They could prove like it was posted there, but whether there was some kind of scheme there, we don't know. I suspect, but you don't know. So
I just didn't know that. Like I think Facebook Marketplace. So I'm thinking secondhand Halloween costumes and maybe a used motorbike, but not a $1 million piece of equipment being sold at an excellent discount.
Yeah, that was the big key. It's like if you do this kind of work to need this kind of machine, that this thing is brand new and it's $1 million piece of equipment. So why do you think it would be $200,000 on Facebook Marketplace? So it's kind of, that was the argument from law enforcement on it. It's like you kind of had to know, even if you didn't really know.
It's crazy. That's like the big stuff. So being part of downstream oil and gas, we have outages, sometimes 30-day, 45-day, and your employee ramp up can go from sometimes 30 to 80% more for outages that you do on just regular maintenance. And so you come in there, you have all these laborers, and we used to have a funny term in like tool rental, right? And tools could be anything less than $1,000, something that can go in the back of your truck. I mean, striker wrenches, just little stuff. And there was always a 3-to-1, one to use, one to lose, and one to take home. So anytime anybody bought something, they're like, I got to buy 3 of them. Why? Well, because the other 2. So now from telematics, they even took to the point where you can actually put Bluetooth devices on these small tools. And you start using cordless tools, let's say commercial projects, the batteries are actually more than the actual tool itself. And so, you're spending sometimes $3 to $5 million on projects like stadium projects where you get 500,000 man hours. Talk about the stuff that just vanishes and it doesn't come back. Like to be able to go in and have like, okay, let's unlock this box. And I know that Rob took this and JP took this. I know exactly where it's at. That's the stuff where it's kind of like, okay, how do I save millions of dollars on projects where usually you just write off that stuff. You're like, it's just job cost. You're like $3 million in just job cost, right? Yeah. And don't even start talking about the labor productivity when people are like, I can't find it. Now it's like, well, go back to the warehouse. Well, go buy something. That's where it's like the costs really start increasing because now you're cutting into labor productivity. Now you have logistics that you have to worry about, inventory turns. It's just so much more than just the telematics piece. It's like, what's the domino effect after if you're not adopting into this type of stuff? And I think sometimes we get so busy that we just accept it. We're like, well, this is the way the job goes. We have to write off this much amount on this project because that's industry average, right? We talk about wrench time. Well, if we get 30% on a job, that's pretty good. You're like, well, why can't we get 50? Are we just kind of just saying, well, 70 is acceptable, that, non-product, time? I guess. It's like, no. We need to get better.
Yeah, forecasting is part of that too. One of the things before we really got into telematics, we would get notice of an audit and we would go look at a fleet with 30 trucks and we would change 36 tires at once and all these lights and fire extinguishers. And you spend $40,000 in a weekend just fixing 20 trucks to make sure that they were good for this audit that was on site. And you probably still have 2 end up out of service. But the CFO comes and he asks the question, is like, how did this happen? 40,000 in a weekend? Like, well, we didn't forecast it. But now you've got this telematics data, where you can forecast things. And one of the things that I try to pitch the most is predictive maintenance. Everybody wants to talk about preventive maintenance. It's like, if you start forecasting your maintenance, do it like run your fleet like an airline runs their fleet. Like they don't wait for the engine to die in midair before they say, hey, maybe we need a new turbo. It's everything is on a schedule. Like when you start using that data to get on that forecast and that schedule, life is so much easier and the CFO will love you forever.
Interesting. Do you do a lot of data collection on the types of equipment and the maintenance intervals, like in the real world scenarios that you're able to then provide back to the manufacturers at all? Or is that not something that ends up working out that way?
I don't I think I want to say Cat did things because they're a Cat dealer. They're still technically, I guess, part of Cat. But any other place that I work, private fleets, we've never fed anything back to a manufacturer that I can think of.
It's an interesting thought that data could be valuable to a manufacturer as well to give more data, real world driven information to their customers to kind of give them better intervals than what might just be some engineer wrote on paper on the real, like the best case scenario versus what actually happens in the field.
Yeah. And thinking about it, I mean, that though, one of the problems that everybody's like, how did you go from Peterbilts to Volvos? And it's like, well, it was tough, first of all, because I don't think they have the same character as a Peterbilt. But one of the things that you can find is I started going, anytime I'd buy a Volvo, I wanted to have a Cummins engine. I wouldn't buy a Volvo with a Volvo in it because not everybody can work on a Volvo engine, but everybody can work on a Cummins engine. So that was one of the big things that I focused on. But when I had Volvos, and I learned this the hard way with Volvo engines, and I would have Volvo come out to do diagnostics and try to fix my truck, whichever happened to be wrong with it, or towed it in, there's data that they were pulling from the truck. Now, what data they actually pulled and collected, who knows? But because that's the kind of the makeup of a Volvo motor, Volvo generally is going to be the one that has to fix it. That can be, I'm sure they're probably pulling some of your information out of there.
Yeah, they plug in the information. I think some equipment manufacturer that they are already started doing it. It's almost like you mentioned airlines, like the black box. And like when there's an incident, they can go back and say, okay, what happened, right? But collecting that data, putting in real world application and saying, okay, the operator was doing this. This is the RPMs they were, at the time, and this is where the failure rate happened. I think that's going to be that next level if it's not been already implemented. Because a lot of times you'll get a piece of machinery back to your yard, or, you're kind of going, wow, what were they doing? Or what were they thinking when that actually happened? Right. And now you can start reading and saying, okay, well, we need to put in fail safes for this kind of stuff because it's not an edge case. This seems to be happening all the time. Right. And you can't get that data by just saying, all right, JP or Joe or whoever is the mechanic, what's your work order saying? Let's compile this paperwork and see if we can compare notes. Like, really? Is that where we're still at today?
Yeah. So Sandstone Mountain in Virginia has got like an 8% grade for like, I don't know, eight miles. It's a long shot. So if you don't start off right, you can get out quick, especially if you're heavy. I was pulling coal from West Virginia, a place called Tams, West Virginia. It was being exported out of Norfolk. Coming down Sandstone Mountain, I knew I shouldn't have done it. My engine brake was not working. My trailer brakes were brand new trailer. So I'm like, brand new trailer, truck is maybe halfway there. I'm going to be fine. I don't need the engine brake. 100,000 pounds of coal on a even brand new brakes for trailer is shot. So anyway, maybe 3 miles down, I lose the truck. Maybe after 2 more miles, I lose the trailer. 2 miles after that, trailer catches fire. And, I don't think I've ever been in this position where I've called my wife and said, hey, this is going to be it, and that was that one time. And I thought for sure that I was going to die on this mountain, right? I was like, I'm too heavy. The next turn, I'm going to roll this over. I'm going over the side. Anyway, it didn't happen. Fire department came, met me at the bottom after it leveled out and I could stop this thing. Everything cooled down a little bit on the truck. But then when they pulled diagnostics, I was going like 136. So when they pulled the diagnostics from the truck, they could see that my max coming down that descent was 136. So like I knew then, I was like, well, there's legitimacy to my fear in this thing now. Like I could have definitely died in this thing, or I could have killed somebody else. So now ever since then, every driver I had going to Tams to pull code, is you stop at the brake check. If nothing works, you don't leave the brake check. I'll send somebody there. But that diagnostic data, it gave a huge amount of information after. All we had to do was pull it. Then on our crash reconstruction side now, like a lot of what I do with expert witness cases for truck and legal litigation, is they can come in and pull CDR data from the crash data for the Bosch system, and they can tell you everything that happened from did they use the turn signal, how fast they were going, did they touch the brake or not touch the brake, did they hit the gas instead of the brake. There's so much data that can come from these systems. And then that's just Bosch. I mean, some vehicles use Continental, and Continental does the same exact thing. I mean, it can give you the delta. I mean, everything that happened before and after and during this crash, they can pull it.
Data overload versus the insights you can pull from data start to conflict, like where it's just you've got too much and you can't make any sense of it. What's the happy medium to get actionable information?
I don't run into it as much with diagnostics. Now, if you have one of those like terrible fleets that's got like 2 million miles on everything and it's just maxed out, you're going to have a huge amount of diagnostic codes. Some of them are just useless, but they will overburden you with diagnostic codes if you've got one of those old worn out fleets. But telematics from a dash cam perspective, if you got a really good system that has high-end accuracy, like a high-end AI compressor where it's constantly detecting everything from not wearing a mask during COVID or smoking in the truck. I mean, you can be overburdened and just like what they're saying is happening with this driver. And one of the problems with litigation is you can have the data and the visibility, but if you're not doing something with it, that becomes an issue. So that becomes a problem for fleets when they're getting too much of that data and they can't constantly manage it. So that's a huge piece where I've seen it really cost. Part of it's the training, part of it's implementing some kind of protocol to actually manage the events in an objective way for everybody. So I basically built out a matrix that we give to fleets, and it'll say, hey, if driver was doing X, then you prescribe them X training in Luma. It'll give them make them complete like a 5-minute training in phone use. And then it'll put a certificate in the file to say, hey, we saw it, we recognized it, we did something about it, we trained this guy. And then on his third one, it'll annotate, hey, this is his third distracted driving. He's done, or he's suspended, or whatever your progressive discipline model is. But you have to have some protocol like that to manage it. And it's not any different with vehicle maintenance. I mean, you have to have something in there to say, like, we're managing our maintenance program or our hours of service or whatever the issue is that you're getting data on.
Yeah. I feel like, and I'm not intimate in this space, so I'm just assuming. But to your point, JP, there's so much data out there, and we live in a world of data that people can access. They can buy. There's systems, modules in place. But Rob, I'm curious to see, like, because you're in this space, is it the training issue where people just feel like so overwhelmed? Companies are like, I really want to do this, but I don't know what I'm getting into. I mean, do you think that's some of the reluctance of why they're not investing is because they're like, if you give me all this data, I'll be lucky if I can basically put 2% of it together to put JB's point, make it actionable, so they just get scared?
Well, that's a lot of them, and a lot of them are looking for the most automated system possible. That way they can automate these tasks. And these systems aren't all there yet. I mean, they don't have, I just went to a conference for Motive specifically, and at Motive's conference, they're rolling out automated coaching, to where it'll automatically send coaching to that driver, and it'll automatically show that they've been coached and that they completed it. That's great. But if you don't have that kind of a system and you're still working on that old Rob matrix method, that works, but it has a huge element of wasted labor tied to it. So it's expensive and it's human error prone, and there's things that you're bound to miss. So a lot of companies that we go to will say, after you've done the demo, we're not interested in this because there's no way we can effectively manage it. So we'd rather not have it at all if we can't manage it. And in some ways that's good. A lot of times with those companies, I'll say, all right, let's cut out the data element of it and just put in something to help indemnify you in case you get hit by that drunk driver or whoever. Just front facing, only when the catastrophe happens will you have data. And that's easier to manage, but it's also not going to help you prevent things and try to drive down those habitual behaviors that or habitual bad costs that people are costing you.
Yeah. What do you think is going to change that perception of them to say it's...
I think when you get to the point where you can actually show them that there's a system that they can put in that's going to manage it from the time that the data is collected to the time that it's actually disposed of and it's handled, they can see that flow complete to where they don't have to have somebody hands-on 40 hours or 50 hours a week managing that data. That'll be groundbreaking for for everybody. And one, a lot of systems aren't all at once, right? Some people have maintenance, they don't have video. Some people have video, they don't have maintenance. So you might get one system that's there, but I think until we get them all there, and if we continue to progress at the rate we're progressing with AI, et cetera, you're not far off from it. Maybe 5 or 10 years, you'll be able to produce something like that, I think.
Yeah. With that idea of progress in mind, what do you think the next kind of 3 to 5 looks like? Like what are the big systems that either are in the works or that you suspect will be the kind of the next generation that'll reshape logistics?
So we've got, I would say generally at Trucksafe, all of the autonomous vehicle companies are clients of ours, whether it's basically any of them. Most of them are clients of ours. So what I would say is you already have some of these autonomous vehicle fleets running van freight from, let's just say, Dallas to New Mexico. It's a straight shot. It's no close quarters driving. But what I'm having trouble kind of rationalizing, knowing what I know, is how will you handle AV with your very manual tasks? We're talking about like pipeline service contractors that are very hands-on manual labor, household goods, flatbed work, hazmat, where you're constantly you're sending trucks to the pipeline, filling up your truck, and then actually going and filling up distribution tanks. Like, I don't see any of that being in the next 10 years. Like, to be able to program a robot to actually have this function, I don't see it. Now, you're driving it, it's there, and I think it'll continue to progress. And then I think a lot of your contract closed loop carriers, let's think about like Mayo Clinic, MD universities, cancer centers that are just closed loop bus services. Beep has already kind of taken that over at Yellowstone Park and just shuttling people around in circles. Schools, parks, medical campuses, it's already pretty much going all AV. So I think there's modes of transport and modes of industry that can accommodate it, but there's going to need to be a long-term process on the more manual modes of it.
There's so many human components, and that's, something like what we built for Faro. Right? We wanted to be that last mile logistics where it's not complex, but there's always edge cases, right? You talk about AVs. Well, it's great if you, let's say, have a vehicle stop at an intermodal, someone loads it up, they tie down the load, and then that vehicle basically drives from point A to point B. Well, Rob, you being a truck driver, loads shift, things happen, right? So who's getting out and readjusting the straps? Who's getting out and checking to make sure nothing's moved, right? There's so many different components. And like for us, we never know what we're getting. Our haulers come up, we're not class A, CDL, but it's like we might be picking up a towable air compressor. We might be picking up a pipe threader that goes in the back of a truck and with some dies. So there's all these little I want to move this and shift it this way. And, we're getting to the job site, but no one's there right now. And we got to go to this other gate. Like, there's so many different things that can happen during that transport where you have AV. AV's like, the map routed me here. Well, this is a solar project, and that's an address. We are like 7 clicks north of this on a dirt road. Oh, well, the pen drop didn't go there. Now all of a sudden, everybody's stopping to try to figure out how to get a forklift to get down to where the truck is to unload. And then it's just, I think we're way off. I think we're probably a good 10 years minimum before we start basically pulling the human aspects of it, unless you're talking about the examples you use, Rob, where it's like we're shuttling people A to B, they can actually get out of the vehicle themselves, or it's one of those things where you have a dry van, everything's loaded in and it stays, and then when it gets to the destination, someone pulls it out. Like, there's controlled models that it works, but we live in a world of edge. And I don't think we're anywhere near trying to basically solve all of those problems yet.
It's a huge element in litigation. So last year I had 5 pipeline litigation cases where load securement was the factor, and all 5 were fatalities. And there's often a technical element in it to where a lot of times I'll testify that not all human drivers have the technical capabilities and the manual dexterity to do certain modes of transport. not all drivers can be hazmat drivers. Not all drivers can be flatbed drivers. Not all people, period, can work in the pipeline industry. So taking that into consideration, actually thinking about making a machine that can replicate what a top level driver can do from a technical perspective, that's a tough consideration. So I think like Scott said, it's way off on certain modes.
Yeah, I had a buddy that was in, did a lot of stuff for DARPA and the robots autonomous, and they did these like programs where schools would come in and they would spend a couple $1 million, right? Sometimes $5 million to do these robots. And they're like, okay, what do you need to do? And they're like, well, they need to get out of a UTV. They need to walk up 3 steps. They need to turn a door handle. Then they need to pick something up, walk down the 3 steps, shut the door, and then get back into the vehicle. And you're looking at millions of dollars, and these robots are falling coming off of the truck or the UTV. They can't figure out how to twist the door handle, right? I mean, we're innovating. Yes, I get it. But there's still these points where it's like you walk into something and you're like, the robot can't navigate this. And human's going to come up and be like, yeah, you move the latch. Like, just go like this. And then, so I still think we're way off. At least I'm hoping that we're way off. Because I don't want to live in a world with a bunch of robots telling me what to do.
Well, there's a lot of times you get to a place like just thinking about flatbed driving. Say a lot of times it's you show up at a job, you have to look at the load. Is it properly wrapped? What size is it? What shape is it? What weight is it? What grade chain do I need? What grade binder? What's the working load limit of the binder? Do I need to go up to 90 grade chain instead of my typical chain? It's like, there's so many different elements that go into a lot of these technical, very minute tasks of driving that you can't just set it and forget it with a robot and say, hey, you're going to go to Faro and pick up this. Well, maybe this isn't there. And maybe then you have to change your mind and say, oh, well, it's not this, it's that. Well, I mean, there's, like you said, there's so many different touch points on the edge cases that you have to think about. And a lot of times, even good humans can't do it. So, I don't see it.
That's when we built this too. We wanted to make sure that we had guardrails, right? One of the big things to us is we stay in our lane. We're not trying to do intermodal, cross country hauling. We're that kind of like, it gets messy. It needs to be right away, right? We cap it at 10,000 pounds. The haulers have certain, capabilities, but we're like, no, you're not getting in over your skis. Just because you went out and bought a trailer and you have a vehicle doesn't mean you're qualified. I mean, one of the things that we're very cautious about is PPE standards. Like, I understand when you're in a truck, shower shoes might be okay. But when we're dealing with job sites, it's like you have to have your boots, you have to have your safety vest, your pants, your hard hat. Like, if you don't have those, serious things can happen. And they're like, well, I'm not used to that. I'm used to basically going somewhere, hopping in my truck, being comfortable in my shorts. And we're like, that's fantastic. Do us a favor. Put on all your stuff before you exit the vehicle. Like it's not negotiable, right? And, I know that's not towards the AI we were talking about, but there's just so many little things that your environment, to your point, Rob, it's going to change. And if you don't adapt and you can't adapt on the fly, it's kind of like, you shouldn't be there.
No, I was just in Pecos. I don't know. I was there for 2 weeks, maybe a week. I don't know. Maybe 3 weeks ago or something. Anyway, I hit Odessa, Midland, and I was in Pecos. And I'm like, damn, I forgot my FR shirt. And I know Berry Brothers and Apache and all these other ones. As soon as I show up, they're going to be like, no. So I had to stop in town and buy an FR shirt for $120 because I wasn't prepared. So it's there's so many human elements to it that down to the PPE that it'll never happen. Well, not never, but 10 years from now maybe.
Yep. And even with humans, I mean, we get a lot of times where it's all over our application. Like, we're utilizing technology, but we're still a human company. But it's showing you alerts like, hey, you got to have all of this stuff. And attention to detail can be challenging sometimes, especially how fast everybody runs. But it's like, you drove 35 miles to pick something up and you don't have a pintle hitch when it clearly asked you, like, got to have a pintle hitch. It's like, okay, so you just wasted 35 minutes of your time 35 minutes of the shipper time. Now everyone's got to scramble to get this, generator out. So, the human element is just like, okay, how do we build guardrails so these things don't happen? And that's where the innovation comes in. We can tie this back into telematics. We can talk this into ERP, even AI, but it's like, how do we give the humans that are continually functioning and that will continue to function the guardrails to be successful? And I think that's what it's all about, right? When we looked at the premise of Beyond the Build, it's the innovation. It's like, there is so many other things going on behind the scenes that people, I think when they drive down the road, they're like, wow, how was that built? Or they walk to a sporting event, like, this is a really cool stadium. I'm like, the fact that you're sitting in the seat enjoying your beer and your hot dog, like, do you understand everything that went into basically just getting you to sit in that seat?
It's a granted thing. Like, a lot of people take so many things for granted. Like, I think we just kind of forget like what actually goes into some of this stuff. Yep.
And I think that's where we come to the forefront. We have conversations like this. We have great people on like you that can give us insight, to things that sometimes we're just not focused on or don't understand. Like JP said, he's like, I don't really know much about telematics. And hopefully now, 50 minutes later, he's like, okay, I can at least have an intelligent conversation on why it's important.
How are we doing on time? Just want to check. I have one other topic I wanted to touch on, unless we're running short on it. You good? Okay, cool. I wanted to touch on a little bit more on the kind of, we're talking about human element, kind of pivot more to the philanthropic element a little bit, because one of the things that you and I discussed a little bit, Rob, was one of the organizations that, you're affiliated with, and I wanted to bring up because I kind of want to know Scott's opinion, because I think there's a lot of alignment there. It was called Emerge Careers, correct? So I'd love if you could kind of summarize a little bit about what that is, why you're passionate about it, and we could wrap things up with a little conversation about that.
Yeah, so I think one of the things with Emerge Careers, when they first got me involved with this, I was interested in it for a couple different reasons. But one of the big pieces is I think a lot of times we have shortages in industries and modes, whether that's trucking or pipeline or construction in general. These are jobs that a lot of times not every American is going to want to do these jobs. So there are people who will work and do these jobs sometimes because they have to, but sometimes because they can't do anything else. So a lot of times with criminal past specifically, they are very limited. There's barriers to getting into a lot of different types of industries. Sometimes even in truck driving, there's trucking companies that will not hire felons. So one of the things Emerge Careers does is recognizing that there might not be a true driver shortage industry-wide. There might not be a true diesel tech shortage industry-wide. But what it'll do is it'll get you out, teach you how to drive trucks or how to fix equipment, and then it'll actually find you employment and get you your license to drive trucks, etc. So it's one of the things it's doing is cutting down on the recidivism piece, but it's also filling a gap in the market because I think it's. I just wrote an article on this yesterday on the age of most of our diesel techs. Like a huge percentage of them are over 40 years old. So it's like, where are we going with this diesel tech piece? And a guy that I know, Johnny Spate, he works for Sunbelt. He's been retired for 2 years, but they brought him back because they literally cannot find a good enough diesel tech to service both trucks and equipment. So I talked to him the other day and said, hey, you're doing construction now, come fix my front door. And he's like, nope, I'm back at Sunbelt because they cannot find a mechanic. So they end up paying this guy twice what he was paying, but getting paid before, because they just needed somebody that was like a lifelong diesel mechanic that could fix anything. And that's kind of where Emerge Careers comes in. It's like they're trying to fill gaps in the market, but they're also trying to give opportunity to people. And I'm not saying we're going to do it for everybody. One of the things I did for them was built out a matrix to say, hey, if you've been convicted of pedophilia, rape, murder, you are barred from our program. We will not even interview you for it. But we're talking like a dime bag charge or possession or even theft or whatever. We can work past all of these things. There are companies that will hire you. Maybe Amazon doesn't want you because you had a theft charge. Well, I know a pipeline contractor that'll hire you today. So what we're trying to do, and what I'm trying to help emerge careers do, is basically fill that void, but also give back some opportunity on it. So it's emerge careers, and then basically, if you're incarcerated, emerge careers works with different states, and how it works is they're getting grants, and the reason it's important that you be a success for their program, and that's why they're selective on who they let in it, is because they can't get grant funding if they're not successful in both teaching you to drive or whatever they're going to teach you and get you placed. So if you're somebody who's a pedophile or a rapist or a murderer, and we know we can't place you easily, you're probably not going to get in. But there's barriers for those anyway. So if you're in a state where emerge careers operates, like Massachusetts is a big one, they're pulling people out, they're getting them jobs, they're putting them to work, and then you're taking somebody from the bottom barrel element of society where they're making 28 cents an hour in prison to getting out making 50, 60,000 a year up front. I mean, that's life changing for a lot of people, but it's also industry changing. So it's a good program. I liked, when they got me involved, I was excited.
This impacts me just a little. Not doesn't impact me, but one of the things that attracts me to this idea is that I have family members that have been incarcerated, and it's not easy coming back, especially if you're in for a long time. And he was blessed to have a support system in family and people to help him along, and a lot of people have very little of that. So I think the unfortunate statistic is something like nearly 80% of those who've been in prison for, say, more than a decade that go back into society, within 6 months or so, they're back in the system. So something like this, I think, is critical to providing. The goal is they paid their debt to society, right? And then they kind of come out and it's like, now what? Having a means for that second chance to be meaningful, impactful, and long lasting, like that resonates a lot with me. And so I like what they're trying to do, because I think a lot of folks deserve a second chance, and a lot of times they need help to get there, because it's not just a mindset. You got to find something that's going to, like a job, that's going to pay the bills, that's going to give you the tools that you need to a lot of times these people are doing what they're doing out of desperation, right? They're either in such a disenfranchised position, or maybe they haven't made the best decisions throughout their life, which a lot of times is what I attribute it to. You make bad decisions, you got to take responsibility for them, and then you've got to live with that. But at some point you have to actually recognize, like, hey, we could do something to, I guess, put a hand, lend a hand to kind of get them up, which I think what the program is really geared toward, is just help you get some footing underneath you to where you don't feel so desperate to where you have to go back to drugs or whatever it is that you're doing, theft, etc. So I think sometimes just getting that footing under you and having some promise in your life, some hope in your life, I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, it sounds like you guys are providing them a purpose, and then more importantly, there's hope. Right? Once you lose hope, all is gone. Not going back to plug the Landman, because I just finished watching it, but there is actually a scene in there where, like, they had an incident where they had a striker wrench on a valve, and it blew up. Not to take the scene away from people who haven't seen it, but the attorney comes out and she's like, why do people do this? He's like, this is a dangerous job. And Billy Bob Thornton, and Tommy Morris is his character, he responds back, he's like, for $100,000 a year and a 6th grade education and a felony on your record, this is a lottery ticket. And it was just like, it brought you back down to your point where it's like, there's a lot of people that don't have opportunities because of past decisions that they made, but there's still a purpose for them. And showing them that, hey, this is the road to promise, and there is still hope for you. That's something, as JP's brought us into with what we do with the third-party independent logistics on a smaller scale. If you own a truck and you're willing to work and put in the hours outside of the majors that you talked about, the pedophilia, the murder, like the stuff that is just a no-fly zone, we're like, yeah, there's a huge opportunity for you, right? You're not hauling people, you're not hauling food, right? And more often than not, you might be picking something up and seeing somebody that you spent, a stretch with on a job site and you guys can shake hands again. I mean, not to say that the oil industry is like that, but it's just like there's people that are having second chances everywhere. And if we're providing a service where they can get on and say, hey, you know what? I can actually earn and not go back to my old ways. You know, it's getting them out of that mindset where like, I have to fit into this box. And I'm like, no, you don't. You just can't go off the cliff.
Yeah, big shout out to Emerge Careers. So if you're listening and that sounds like something that you or someone you know could benefit from, definitely check it out. And with that, I guess we can call time, Rob. It's been really fun chatting with you and learning a lot about, as Scott said, things that I came in not knowing much about, and now I know a lot more. So that was very, very interesting for me.
Yeah, I came into this call too, and this is not the intro, but Rob, your resume is amazing. I mean, the amount of positions that you're currently still holding, I'm like, I don't know when you sleep.
Well, that's half the problem. It's like you try to juggle it, and sometimes you get overburdened with the juggle. I mean, because sometimes it's easier because you can kind of fit like, hey, I've got this case. It's kind of like lawyers that prioritize cases. One I know is coming up on like the 13th, right? I don't really have to start working in depth on that until maybe the 5th. I can prioritize a lot of it. A lot of it's about time management. Sometimes when you get somebody that's like, hey, I want to call at 3 on Tuesday, and then everybody wants to call at 3 on Tuesday, it can become pretty wild.
Yeah, and my memory is not that good, so I'll probably miss some stuff. But when I started going through everything that you're involved with, from being a truck driver to an educator to risk to litigation to DOT compliance, I was just like, wow, I could have like a 5-hour conversation with this guy, and we could pick so many different lanes where like we talked about a lot about telematics, but I'm sure there's a book in there where we could probably do one a day and dive into some wormhole of the amount of information and resources that you have and interact with on a daily basis. So I just want to say kudos to you, my friend, for being like innovative and being able to juggle all those things and still keep your head on straight.
Well, I got emancipated when I was 15, so a lot of my life has been spent like making sure you stay out of the bottom of the bucket. It's like, when crabs get down there, they try to claw themselves out, and it's tough. But once you get out, you don't want to fall back in. So it's like, whatever, you got to keep doing. And my wife's like, what do you do when you make it? And it's like, what do you mean when I make it? I'm never making it. I'm going to keep making it because you don't know when you're not going to make it. So it's my biggest problem so far that I've got to work on is telling people no, I can't do that. Because if you call me, I will be like, yep, we're going to make it work.
That's where I get to think as well, too. I want to make sure that my yeses are yes and my no's are no. And then I'm living for a greater purpose other than myself.
Well, thanks again, guys, and really appreciate the time, and have a great one. And yeah, it's been a great chat.
All right. Thanks, Rob.
Thanks.
Well, everyone, that is a wrap for today's episode of Beyond the Build. We took away some real valuable lessons and insights, and I hope that you did as well.
If you enjoyed this episode, we would ask that you subscribe so you can never miss an update. If you're a thought leader looking to innovate in the construction industry, let's talk. We'd love to connect and hear your thoughts.
You can find Beyond the Build on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, plus anywhere else that you listen. And if you'd like to learn more about how Faro is changing logistics in the construction industry, please visit our website at faronow.com.
Once again, thanks for tuning in. And until next time, be humble, serve others, and make an impact.